Hey, so today we're going to talk about human systems, and we're going to start off by actually learning about the circulatory system. But before we get into that, just really briefly, when we talk about human systems, we're going to learn about 5 crucial human systems, and all these systems that we're going to learn about work together to keep us alive. They're all incredibly important, and we cannot live without one of these 5 systems that we're going to discuss over the next few days. Just a reminder that we've already talked about the organization of multicellular organisms. So starting out at the cell, and then we have tissues, and then we have organs, and then we have systems, and then of course we have the organism. And right now we're focusing in on systems. So where organs or tissues are working together in order to have a larger function. So circulatory is what we're focusing on today. Now this is a pretty surface discussion of this. We're not going to get crazy into it, but you're going to learn some detail. And then later on, we're actually going to learn too about different disorders that can happen or problems with the circulatory system. So what does the circulatory system do? Well, the main thing it does is it carries oxygen from our respiratory system, from our lungs, and food from our digestive system, and other substances that need to be taken throughout the body. It makes it go throughout the body. So basically, it's like the shuttle system. It's moving things to where it needs to go. It also transports some waste to other organs for elimination by the excretory system. It helps to defend against diseases because the blood contains immune system cells, right? Like our white blood cells. And then also it connects all the different organ systems essentially together, right? Because it moves things from one spot to another spot. So, of course, we have the heart as being one of the major organs of the circulatory system, and that is the pump that forces blood to go throughout the body. So to learn a little bit about the heart, we have a diagram on the next page here, but basically the heart is split into 4 chambers. Okay, so we have 4 chambers here, and I'm just drawing a really crude diagram for those 4 chambers. But we have the left and right atriums, and now actually this is weird. This is going to seem confusing. But when we label the heart, we actually label it as if the page that the heart is on is turned around and then is on us. So we're showing our heart. So this would be the left side of the heart, and this would be the right side of the heart. Okay, so blood goes into the right atrium, which is kind of the receiving, like it receives blood. And I kind of started here, but that's okay. So blood goes into the right atrium after going throughout the body and delivering its oxygen and then picking up carbon dioxide. Okay, then it goes to the right ventricle. Then after this, it gets pumped out by the right ventricle to the lungs. And at the lungs, it releases carbon dioxide by diffusion. So that diffuses out of the blood into the lungs. And then also oxygen diffuses from the lungs into the blood and gets carried by the red blood cells. So now we have blood that has oxygen in it, which then goes to, I've kind of done this a little bit weird, but that's fine, the left atrium. Okay, which receives that blood, and then it goes through to the left ventricle, and then this goes to the full body. Okay, so this then goes to everywhere in your body where oxygen needs to be delivered and waste needs to be picked up. So essentially that's what we're looking at here. Here's another diagram that shows actually a proper heart. So the right atrium, this is getting blood from your body, from your brain, your limbs, everything that goes through to the right ventricle. This then ends up sending blood that doesn't have oxygen in it to our 2 lungs. So that's where we have the lungs here and here. Okay, and then from there it comes back and it goes to the right atrium, or sorry, the left atrium. After going to the lungs, it comes back to the left atrium, then it goes to the left ventricle, and then it gets forced out to the full body now that it has oxygen in it. But it gets oxygen at the lungs. So let's talk now about, now that we've got a little bit of background with the heart, and actually I feel bad because I didn't read this part. The atriums receive blood from the lungs and body, so it receives it, and then the ventricles are the major actually pumping part of the heart. And you can see, actually, if I take a look at this diagram, you can see these thick muscle walls of the heart, right, on our ventricles, and that's what contracts and pushes the blood throughout the body. The left side of the heart has blood full of oxygen, so this is the oxygenated side. This is where we have oxygen-rich blood. And then the right side is my oxygen-poor blood. Okay, so there's no or very little oxygen in the blood that's going through the right side of the heart, because then the right side of the heart pumps it to the lungs, where it gets oxygenated for the blood, so it's oxygen rich at that point. Then it comes back to the left side of the heart to get pumped throughout the body. So I have essentially two sides or two pumps in the heart. One side, the right side, pumps to the lungs, and the left side pumps to the rest of the body. Okay, blood vessels. We're going to start by talking about the veins. Veins carry blood back to the heart after the oxygen has essentially been used up and it's got waste CO2 and it's coming back to the heart. And the way that this actually works is that there are valves in your veins that stop it from coming back down. So whenever muscles and stuff contract, then it actually like pushes blood up the veins, and then that blood can't actually go backwards because the valve closes. So the blood goes through here, right? Comes up. And then after the muscle is contracted and the muscle is loose, then it's closed for the valve, so the blood can't go back down. It's not possible because this valve is closed. So then at the next muscle contraction, it goes up further and further and further until it comes back to the heart. So those are your veins. So veins carry deoxygenated blood, so oxygen-poor blood, and it carries that oxygen-poor blood back to the heart. Arteries carry oxygen-rich blood, and they have thick walls, thick muscular walls, because they have a lot of pressure on them. So arteries are oxygen-rich blood coming from your heart, going to where it needs to go. It carries blood away from the heart. When we actually have blood that's going to the lungs, we call that the pulmonary artery. And then when it's coming back from the lungs, then it's the pulmonary vein. So actually saying that blood in arteries is always oxygen rich is not quite correct. And the reason why it's not quite correct is because of that pulmonary artery. So the better rule is just that it always pumps blood away from the heart. And those thick walls help to deal with the high blood pressure of the blood coming from the heart, because the heart has a lot of pressure. Okay, it puts a lot of pressure on that blood. Capillaries connect arteries and veins together. They are incredibly tiny, tiny, thin blood vessels, and they have very little thin walls. And the reason why is so that exchange can happen of nutrients and gases between the capillaries and the actual cells, right? To give oxygen and carbon dioxide and whatever. No cell in your body is actually 3 cells away from capillary, or as some people say, capillary. So no matter what, every cell in your body is within 3 cells of a capillary blood vessel. So again, very thin walls to help with nutrient exchange by diffusion between the cell and the capillary. Now, because there are so many capillaries, right? So many capillaries, if you were to actually take all the capillaries, put them together and take a look at how thick they are when you add them all together, they actually have a very large area, very large cross section. So in the arteries, I've got a lot of pressure, a lot of velocity, but once it gets down to the capillaries, because it's quite a bit larger, right, it doesn't have as much velocity or pressure, which is a good thing, because then that would just burst through the capillary walls. So this is kind of a neat diagram to show the total cross-sectional area and the fact that for capillaries, there's a ton of cross-sectional area compared to, let's say, the arteries. Okay, so here's a nice little diagram showing the full system. So I have my heart here. Okay, this is the right side of the heart that carries deoxygenated blood. So it goes out from that right side and goes to the lungs. So you can see it splits to the left and the right side to go to the lungs here. At this point, this is the pulmonary artery because it's carrying blood away from the lungs. and pulmonary because it's going to the lungs. Then from there it comes back and goes to the left side of the heart, goes to the left atrium. Then that goes to the left ventricle, which pumps it throughout the body, going up top and down below to all of your cells that need oxygen and nutrients. And then it comes back through the veins and ends up going to the right atrium, and then from there the right ventricle when things start up all again. All right, so that is most of the circulatory system. The very last thing to talk about is blood. And blood, of course, circulates throughout your body, delivering oxygen, nutrients, and picking up waste. So blood contains the main thing, the most important thing is these red blood cells. And this is what binds and carries the oxygen. You actually looked at this a little bit when we looked at cells. It has something inside of it called hemoglobin, which is a protein that contains iron. And this protein binds to oxygen, so it carries oxygen in the red blood cells to carry it throughout your body. Then we have plasma, which is like the broth of the soup, broth of the blood. And carbon dioxide dissolves in that plasma, nutrients and other stuff. And then of course we have white blood cells that fight infection, and platelets that close up, scrapes and stuff. They basically cause blood to clot, the platelets. All right, so that's your circulatory system. You learned about the heart, you learned about the different vessels, and you learned a little bit about blood. That's it.